Rob, I believe we have all board members present.
So very good. Can you actually see me, Sean?
I cannot, but doesn't mean that other people can't see you.
Okay, I did test out the Zoom earlier today, but we're back. I had to get another bottle of water and run down the office to get that. So we're back, and I do believe if we do have everyone, then we do have just a modification to the agenda slightly, and then we can move on.
Yes, we have two modifications to the agenda. The first modification to the agenda is a modification to the personnel report. And we also have a modification to the agenda that was not discussed or submitted previously, which was a conversation on the health fund reserve that the board will be creating.
Okay. All right, without objection, we can go ahead and move on with the agenda. And I think, well, I have it over here. So really, the next is the public comment period, Sean, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. To the folks in the public, we are continually trying to modify our public comment. We understand that not everyone is familiar with the Zoom technology. If you could find some way to identify yourself, either raise your hand, click the go faster, the yes, no, some way, we will unmute you from this end and we'll hear public comments. Please state your name for the official minutes and we will proceed from there. But yes, this is the time for us to have public comments.
And Sean, I'll let you run it.
Hello, Sasha. I don't know if you wanted to leave a public comment or not, but you are unmuted at this point in time. Great. We'll give it another minute in case anyone wants to. And I don't believe I talked to Tricia earlier. I don't believe we had any public comments sent to the board clerk either.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
1 second, just to make sure.
Okay.
Well, Rob, we're all set. I will remind folks, please feel free to reach out to the board clerk for any public comments, either via phone or email. You can also reach out to any board member individually. So for community members and the public who are who are listening and watching tonight's virtual board meeting, there are multiple ways in which to get in contact with us, and we actively encourage you to do so. So thank you all.
Thank you, Sean. So let's move on to the consent agenda. There's several items there that we could probably speak to. And
Rob,
go ahead.
Rob, we need a modification to the consent agenda as published.
We did do that, Pat. I believe.
Okay, sorry. Must not have.
Right, the personnel report, correct. Sean went through that, I believe.
Wow, you guys were fast. I thought I got right into this meeting, but no. Wow.
Pat, Sean was ready to go, and I'm not going to hold Sean back, so it's all good.
No. I'm old and slow. He's young and quick.
Exactly. So there were several items that were discussed in finance meeting and then facilities work session. Chris, I'm not sure whether you want to speak to it, but certainly Amanda probably should weigh in on the resolution of the revenue anticipation note. Would be helpful.
Yes, Rob. I won't be able to do it as much justice as Amanda would. My layman's term, the revenue anticipation note is basically us getting this ready with the uncertain times. So as we move forward, if we needed to get the monies available, you could sign off on it and get them moving. It's there whether we need it or not. Amanda, please feel free to chime in.
I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Yes. So Sean, that's it. It really is just essentially, given the times that we're under, in case we need it, it's already done. It was actually a recommendation from our bond council that a lot of school districts, most school districts across the state are doing this. So it's just sort of a safety net.
Right, and this is different than the bands that we do, the bond anticipation notes. That's short-term borrowing as we're working on construction projects, and then go ahead and do the long-term borrowing once we are finishing up with that, meaning that we're going to go ahead and refinance that. Revenue anticipation notes are really very different. That's just short-term borrowing in anticipation that perhaps you're going to have a revenue stream coming in from the state or feds to cover that debt. So this is very different, and we've never done a RAN as long as I've been on the board, but it's different times, and so we'll see. But likely we won't use it, but you never know. And Amanda, since you're on the line, there's two resolution to accept the letter of recommendation for the door hardware, and the resolution to accept the letter of recommendation for the turf replacement and really construction projects. You're going to speak to it later, but if you want to just touch on those quickly.
Amanda's audio is reconnecting.
Okay.
I believe she may be back now. However, let's see, Amanda,
Lily, I can go ahead and just,
Great.
Both these are, we'll talk about it in a few minutes when we get to the school district business, but we are re-engaging and restarting our construction projects because we are allowed to do so by the state. And these are just resolutions that have been vetted through the OACM meetings, and then the facilities work session last Thursday. Many hours were spent going through all this, and so these are recommendations for the initial, some of the initial bids that we have to complete, and sooner the better. So structure and material can be ordered. So that's the part of the consent agenda. And Amanda and Chris will get to the facilities update in just a few minutes. And then it's personnel list, and then I think that's about it as far as anything that you need to know. Or,
yes. Hope is not here still. Ryan? Yes, if you can't hear me, tell me. Yeah, I got it.
So are we good, Sean?
Yes, good by me. I don't know if we've had a motion to move the consent agenda yet.
Good time to do it. We'll need a motion.
I move the consent agenda for adoption. It's Pat.
Right.
Eldred, I second.
Second by Eldred. Any other questions? Probably not, but feel free. We good? So then all in favor? I vote yes.
This is Chris. I vote yes.
Moira votes yes.
Pat votes yes.
Ann votes yes.
Nicole Lefebvre votes yes.
Erin Croyle votes yes.
Sean, I vote yes.
Sean, are you the last?
Always looking.
Did we have Eldred?
Yep.
Eldred, I vote yes.
All right. Is that everyone? We good? All right, I think that moved, seconded, and all in favor. And so that was passed. And so I think we're on to Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Ainsley, and the privilege to be with you all this evening. Just one item tonight. I wish to engage the board in a bit of a discussion, brief discussion about a topic that we've spoken briefly about, but we need some additional clarification as there's been new guidance coming from our health department and state as every day. We've talked about our playgrounds, courts, and fields. And we previously, when having this conversation in the midst of this pandemic, we talked about putting up signs and asking folks to limit access, to limit themselves when going on to our courts and maintain social distancing. Since our last conversation, we've received additional guidance. Quite frankly, our health department has asked that we shut down our playgrounds and courts and fields. And that's happening all over our community and all over our state. So we're at a place tonight, we as an executive team, we've talked about this with our administrators, we've talked as a team. We're recommending that we move forward with locking our tennis courts, our track, putting up tape, putting up signs to make sure folks know that we are closing those spaces and are disallowing access to them until further notice. Again, that's a recommendation from us to you all. We would love to hear your thinking. It pains me to have this conversation with you. I don't like this, particularly as it gets warmer. And we know we have young people who are not with us in our spaces, and they're going to be looking to do something active, and they're going to be looking to be on grounds, particularly at some of our spaces. But as you know, things are changing daily, and we need to be a leader in this regard and limit access to those spaces where we know folks are not practicing social distancing. So that's my training. I would love to hear your thoughts and hear your thoughts on our recommendation.
Hi guys, this is Eldred. I think I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago when we were together. To me, it makes sense to close down our spaces which lend themselves to congregation naturally, right? And leave open spaces where social distancing is almost required or would be a lot easier. And I say that because unless the state, unless everyone else closes state parks, right, people are out exercising. It would occur to me that the more spaces people have to engage in this activity, the easier it would be to keep these distances. The more we shut these down, but not shut them down in coordination, I could see 60 people now walking up and down the Black Diamond Trail, for example, right? Because there's no other place to walk. So it's either, to me, it's either all or nothing. And the piecemeal thing seems to actually get us the opposite result of what we intend. Just my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, well, the health department is recommending closing recreational facilities where there's shared equipment. And they're not talking about closing down places where people can stay 6 feet apart and are not touching the same equipment. So, there are actually a lot of trails to walk in this community, and I've been walking a lot of them, and on none of them have I had trouble being able to keep at least 6 feet apart.
Well, Moira, you need to let me know what trails you're walking on, because every trail I walk on, I'm between 2 and 3 feet from people as we pass each other. But
well, I walked the Black Diamond Trail, the Waterfront Trail, the South Hill Recreation Trail, and I have had no problems with those.
Yeah, well, my spouse and I definitely have had problem keeping 6 feet because there have been any number of people there. But I don't think that's the question that I'm trying to speak to. I know Aaron has raised this question previously amongst the board. If we read the recommendation from the department or the county Department of Health, that it's recommending that our language and our signs be updated. I know at facilities meeting, which happened on Thursday, April 9th, we had a conversation with Paul Alexander about printing new signs that were larger and had much clearer language about what's to be expected. Since then, 2 days later, on April 11th, the county has recommended that we take even more stringent actions. So I think the question becomes, do we start taping off our playgrounds? I know I heard Dr. Brown talking about locking our tennis courts. The city has already removed all of its basketball hoops from its various properties. So I think if we're trying to keep in keeping with what the county has strongly recommended we do, that we need to take a little bit more stringent action than what we have done. And I'll wait to hear comments from my colleagues.
This is Pat. I'm going to support that we follow the county health department's recommendations. They're a good health department, and none of us are doctors.
Hi, this is Chris. I agree with Pat. I definitely think we should secure them. We have no way of controlling the traffic to those places. And, you know, we have a certain level of responsibility.
All right, Eldred again. Maybe I'm just slow tonight. It could be. Somebody explain how a tennis court can be implicated in what the county is considering regarding safe social distancing and sharing of equipment. I just don't get it.
Let me help with this, Eldred. And I've received a number of emails about the tennis court. I think it's because it's so close to Route 13, and when people are riding by, they see folks playing on the weekends, and I've seen it as well. That definition of shared equipment could be that net. If touching that net, that's a piece of shared equipment.
Also, it's the ball. They touch the same ball.
Yeah, the ball. Thank you, Moira. So there is shared equipment on that tennis court, and politically, that's what everyone is seeing in our community right now. That's a hot spot. But I mean, also the basketball course is the basketball is a shared piece of equipment. The pole, what we've learned about the virus and how it can stay on a piece of metal for a long time. I wouldn't suggest or recommend that we remove the actual hoop, but use signage and tape instead in lieu of removing the actual hoop to show that we would not want folks on the actual basketball court. But I can't think of any of our courts that wouldn't have some shared equipment. And we don't have as many trails. Yeah.
This is Ann here. What do you mean by tape in relationship to the basketball court?
Yeah, we could tape them off, yellow tape. I'm thinking about the court behind Boynton, which is another hot spot on the weekends. We could tape that area where folks, where our young people are doing recess on a given day. It pains me not to see them doing recess every day, but right now we have a bunch of community members who go out there and play on that court. We could do some things with tape, some temporary fencing. So there's some options we could use for our spaces to cord them off.
So Dr. Brown, we're going to put tape around a court and we're going to police it?
No, that's
right. And so we're not policing our sites here, other than if we have the tennis courts, there is a fence around it. There is a locking door to it, right? We can do that. As far as I could tell from the Board of Health's recommendations, they were saying that we should close off fields, right? Yeah. Which is, it's impossible for us to do.
Yeah.
Right. So, and signage and some tape, but then, it's going to be up to some governmental authority to police all that. If the cops want to pull people over for being too close together, they do that in some states. But, I certainly hope that we don't do that here.
Yeah, we don't have the staff or the resources right now to police our
right. So people have to understand that we are, if there's people on the courts and the schools are closed, we're not, if they tear the tape and walk in and do what they want to do, they're making a decision that we do not recommend. Right.
Yeah,
I think all of that makes sense. What I would also recommend, and we had this conversation briefly, is that our signs are a little bit more prominent, and that we do follow the county recommendation saying, for example, this playground is closed. That's what I keep seeing at the state parks. It's a tough thing to see, and I'm not personally in favor of it, but as Pat said, I'm going to yield to the medical doctors, Pat. Some of us are doctors, but I'll yield to the medical doctors about what they recommend.
Hi, everyone. This is Nicole. I guess one of my thoughts is if we move forward with closing our schools, do we have any intention on tapping into our athletic department or wellness people on how to keep kids active? Like we already know in terms of access, not all of our children have access to a backyard where they can just go outside and run and play. So some of it is going to their local playground versus folks who don't have access to drive out to Buttermilk where there's 6 feet of area to walk around. And knowing that a lot of our parents are at home with their children, going outside is somewhat of a mental break for parents as much as it is for kids. So are we thinking about ways in which to support kids in getting some physical activity if they're not allowed to go to the playground or outside?
And this has been something I've been pleasantly surprised with. Our physical education teachers have done an outstanding job of putting out resources. They've actually created a couple of sites, some instructive videos. We can do more to communicate that out, maybe send that out to all families, along with maybe an announcement about this shift here. But yeah, we'll connect more with Samantha Little, our wellness folks, Carrie Burke, and our PE folks about what folks can do in lieu of doing the things that we are now asking them not to do. I hope that helps. And anyone else on the team can jump in on that as well. Yeah, PE teachers have actually made an app, and we will do our best to get that app out to folks that will help them involved.
And I certainly agree with Nicole. Kids need to be outside and have an opportunity to let off some energy. And you know, this virus, as far as I have read and heard and listened, it doesn't like sunshine and humidity. So be outside and in the sun. I think that's a good place to be.
It's actually, it does like sunshine and humidity, and it's thriving in tropical countries. So I just don't want misinformation to get out there. And I think it's important taping off our playgrounds. I just want to add, just because parents do let their kids go out without them, and kids can play on the playgrounds together in groups. So I think it's a really great move to just tape that off, and hopefully they'll play in other open spaces.
All right. As we announced this,
I've read other research that says the virus doesn't like sunshine, but it's okay. We'll see.
We'll put out some information to our community about this decision, the direction we're going, and we'll ask, you know, we'll remind folks that we're in this thing together. And I'll put in a special plug. I'm hoping that if folks see folks gathered in the space, and although we've closed, just to not email me. I'm tired of getting hundreds of emails. I'm not the police on this thing. We're gonna have to work on this together in some other ways other than sending the superintendent an email on Saturday afternoon, asking me to come down and get people off the basketball court. I'm just so hopeful that's not helpful. All right, that's all I have, Ms. Dainsley, Sean. Any other questions or thoughts?
So, so let's get right into school district business and the ICSD distance learning 2.0 update.
All right, I'll ask Ms. Talcott and friends to come on screen.
Wonderful, thank you everyone. Hello, for those of you who are on and are not familiar with me, my name is Lily Talcott. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for the Ithaca City School District. And we have some very special guests here this evening who are going to share some of their experiences and their students' experiences with distance learning. But prior to that, I'm going to do a little bit of framing. So Dr. Eversley Bradwell, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay with you.
Sorry, are you able to do that now, Lily, or do I have to stop sharing for you to share?
Yes, I think we are all set. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Yep. Terrific. All right, wonderful. So like I said, I'm going to do a little bit of framing here regarding distance learning 2.0, and then I'm going to turn it over to two fabulous educators, Jordy Rohr and Carrie Glenn Kehoe, who are 6th grade math teachers at DeWitt Middle School, and they're going to talk a little bit about their story and how they're supporting their kids through this transition. I want to start by really thanking our educators, so our principals, our teachers, our education support professionals, our folks in the EA union as well, who have spent so much time working together and working extremely collaboratively in order to design what distance learning 2.0 can look like. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to our union heads as well, who have been wonderfully collaborative as well. I'd also like to send a very special thank you to our students and families who have been providing feedback, and to the families who are frankly implementing a lot of this and supporting their students through this transition as well. So with this brief overview, I wanted to be clear that we're supporting students through distance learning, first, really starting with their social emotional experiences, and Jordy and Carrie are going to talk a little bit about that later, and also their academic growth as well. So starting with those two key points, we have designed a system that is synchronous and or asynchronous, so providing some at the same time or in real time learning experiences that are done through primarily digital platforms, things like Google Meet, similar to what we're on here now. And then asynchronous learning as well. So that can be done anytime, where students are engaging in learning experiences at home through, again, online platforms, and also through physical materials, right? So reading actual books or creating art projects, etc. Additionally, our teachers are offering office hours, and those are less formal times for teachers to connect with students and engage in learning and supporting them as well. There are some key elements that are guiding us as we've designed this system. In our working groups, we have had over 200 educators work together in smaller pods to really flesh out exactly what it will look like, sound like, feel like for our students as we've transitioned to this 2.0 model. So thank you to all of them. And of course, we're continuing to focus on our 3 key levers: culturally responsive practices, inclusion, and innovation. Additionally, we've worked really hard to ensure equity and access in terms of access to digital, to Chromebooks, and also to the internet. So we're working with families. As of yesterday afternoon, we had 14 families district-wide. We were still awaiting getting totally set up for internet access, which is pretty good. I feel all things. Yeah. So additionally, we've been clear that we need to be very flexible with our educators, with our students, and with families as well. We know that there are also a lot of questions about privacy, and we are certainly attending to FERPA, or the Family Educational Rights, pardon me, sorry, and Privacy Act. Right, we are recording sessions and encouraging at this time, encouraging our teachers to record any synchronous sessions that they're holding, because we know that some students may not be able to access this learning in real time, and that this provides equity and access for those students. We know that although families may have concerns, that they can certainly mute and turn off the video if they're concerned. And we also know that we have a responsibility to communicate a lot more regarding this, and certainly will be. We wanted our community to be sure that they knew there's an ICSD family and student support line, and that can be accessed anytime. So folks can call 607-882-9850. Folks leave a voicemail message, and we very quickly have been able to turn that around and make sure to get that to the right person to then respond. This is for anything that's technical or instructional. So if you have questions about how to complete a child's assignment, you can certainly email your child's teacher. You can also call this number, right, in order to get a response and gather some more information about how to complete that. And of course, if something like a Chromebook is broken or screen or a charger is needed, folks can also call this as well. We also want to make sure that our families and our students know that there's a lot of support that's on our website now. And so this is just an example of one of the pages that's embedded within our website that has a lot of links and a lot of options for families and students to gather some more information and some support. So that's just a brief overview. I think it's probably more helpful for you all to hear a little bit more about what this actually looks like in practice. We had the great pleasure yesterday at Curriculum Committee of getting to hear from Callie Bryant and Mike Treat, who are also teachers at DeWitt Middle School. And today we get to hear from Jordy and Carrie. So I am going to turn it over to them. They are an excellent co-teaching pair at DeWitt Middle School. They're going to talk a little bit about their experiences and how their students have been doing and responding in relationship to Distance Learning 2.0. Jordy and Carrie, if you can hop on over there.
Has to unmute us.
Okay. So I'm Jordy Rohr, and I co-teach with Carrie Glenn Keogh.
Hi. I'm muted now?
You are.
I am. Okay, cool. Great.
So this is exactly how it works when we talk with the kids too, is we kind of figure it all out as we go. So bear with us, as this is new technology. So something to know about us, one, is that this is our first year co-teaching together. So it's already an awesome experience of like getting to know each other and teach with each other. And the things that we're going to talk about today are things that really work well for us and our group of students. We've kind of spent each week in this prior to Learning 2.0 changing how we're interacting with our kids based on their student suggestions and what they want and need from us. And so what we talk about may work for us, but they may not work for all teachers in all classes. So we're just happy to share what we have. I'm going to share my screen real quick so you guys can see our slideshow. Hopefully it works out. Okay.
You did it.
Woohoo. We totally practiced before, just so you all know. Okay. So Carrie is going to start us off.
So I guess the way that we started was, I was just looking back in our Google Classroom page to see, I'm like, when do we start talking with kids about this? And it was actually right away on March 14th is the first post that Jordy sent out saying, hey, I just want to check in to see how everyone's doing. Feel free to comment below. Thinking of all of you. Buddy says hi with a picture of her dog. So, you know, a lot of our first interactions with kids on the announcement that we wouldn't be returning physically to the classroom for a while was just kind of checking in and seeing how they were doing. And then partway through that first week or so, we started giving some optional activities. Lots of kids were saying that they were bored and they started getting sick of it. They were also telling, you know, we got to meet a lot of, we did set up some Google Meets and had conversations just kind of in our stream on Google Classroom with students. And then we've met a lot of siblings and we've met a lot of pets because they show us their animals seem to really like to come on these things. The first assignment we gave that was an optional assignment was just a review assignment to create your own board game using a topic or a combination of topics that we had taught earlier in the year. And then we kind of grew our lessons from that. I'm not sure how much detail to go in on these.
Yeah, so like every week we've kind of made our, I call them our Google Slides better. Like the first week we did them, it was just like input information here. And the second week we, got a little bit more creative, and we're really lucky because at DeWitt we have our 6th grade math team. So that's Carrie and myself, but there's also Marietta Gibb and Nikki Parasiliti, who are on the opposite 6th grade team from us. And the 4 of us have been meeting every week virtually just like this and talking about how we can best support our students based on what we've done the week before. So now we've incorporated videos in them. We're able to do our IXL, Khan Academy, just interactive slides where they're actually each getting their own slide to put work into. So we just keep kind of getting better and better every week.
Yeah. I mean, the rhythm, I guess, of our week, well, maybe that's on the next slide, right, Jordy?
Yeah. So our office hours, just like Carrie said, it really started off as just like community building with everyone. We just wanted to make sure that our students were okay. It was great. Some parents actually jumped on. They're like, hey, how's it going? And it's just been nice. We've met so many siblings and future students. And that got kids really comfortable with talking in this format. If we had gone straight to just math, I don't think the kids would feel as comfortable talking to us as they do now. And kids just want to check in, even if they don't have a math question, they're just craving attention. And so we make sure to put that into our office hours. So we've pretty much had it been student guided so far, where kids been able to ask questions, and I might be talking through the question, and Carrie is then writing all of the work. If you look down below on this slide, so Carrie's showing the kids exactly what I'm talking about as we're going, or one of us is talking and one of us is going through the chat feature and interacting with the kids that way, answering questions. And so it's really similar to being in the classroom where we're just tag teaming and working together. And so we're moving on to, it's still office hours, and we give kids kind of an agenda of what it's going to be, but there's a little piece in the beginning where we might teach a piece that it's already pre-recorded in our classroom, but they can see it again live and ask any questions there with that Q&A time. And then leaving the end of our office hour time an ability for them just to reconnect and talk about whatever, their pets, their hobbies, all their hikes. Students are telling me all these great places to go hiking now, and so excited to check it out.
Yeah. And then they ask us questions too, are we going to get to come back to school? Is there going to be summer school for everybody? Just, normal questions that 11-year-olds have. So it's a nice place for them, I think, to get a little bit of just some grounding and security with being with their teachers and classmates.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a math lab. We have a smaller group session later in the week for kids that need extra support, and that's open for students to drop into as well. So here's an example of a student sample of their work. So they could design anything they wanted on this grid, and we were working on percents. And this student is actually the child of a teacher on our team, so we have permission to play her work because I know that gets tricky. So she, and when the students, what they ended up saying is they liked it better being able to input their answers into the Chromebooks so we can give them feedback. So we write questions back. So I wrote a question about this one, what's the significance of the 011? Is that what it is? And then they'll write me back and let me know, how they picked that particular design.
Yeah, and it feels more personal in a way, which seems weird since it's virtual, but we're able to have a lot more personal contact conversation with kids, just writing back and forth, or them coming and asking us questions or emailing us. And it could be questions that, they've often been too embarrassed to ask in class, but they have no problem asking in this format. The last thing I just wanted to highlight is how amazing IXL has been for us. IXL is something that we were able to get actually at the beginning-ish of this year, starting in, I think, October, November. And so it's been really great in this transition to be able to still use the same program with students. But pretty much IXL is a great way to be able to pick standards that we're trying to teach and be able to figure out in real time what students are understanding, what students need help. And I've been able to see like a kid is working on a skill totally like independent at home whenever they want. And then I can email them and be like, hey, I see that you got this incorrect, try this out. And they've been able to be like, oh, thanks, that was really helpful. So it's really nice. It's full of great data that we can use pretty much instantly. Anything else you would like to add, Carrie?
No, I think that's great. I mean, there's been some students who, I mean, we're getting decent participation before you know, grades start counting or things like that. So we're feeling pretty optimistic. A lot of our time has also just been reaching out to students and families, like specifically just making phone calls and texts and trying to help people navigate, you know, the new system. And I find that like just individually reaching out a lot of times on the phone has helped get families where the students weren't participating for a couple weeks to start participating now. So that's been a good.
Yeah, there was a moment a student came to a lab I was doing and all of a sudden I text Carrie in the middle of it. I'm like, the student you've been looking for is here. Come on real quick. And, you know, Carrie was able to come jump on and it was just nice to, you know, be able to interact with someone who we haven't seen in like 3 weeks. And we were just so excited.
Yeah. At first he told me, he's like, I'm not doing digital learning. It's not for me. And I'm like, please log on, just try it. So that was good. Yeah. Those moments are really nice.
I'm going to stop sharing this document and kind of leave it up to you guys.
Jordy, Carrie, thank you so much. This was really lovely to have a very clear example of not only the love and care that you're bringing to your kids in their learning, but also some real examples of some of the things that students are learning. So thank you very much. So we'll, open it up to the board. Questions, thoughts, ideas?
Yeah, Jordy and Carrie, this is Pat Waslow, and I'm one of the board members who got a chance to visit your class a few years ago. And it's nice to see you again. I want to thank you for your presentation. I really want to thank you for the human connection that you're bringing to these kids, because that's what school is all about, and that's what makes learning work. So you're talking about running these sessions online, and how many sections of math do you have, and how many kids are the two of you serving, and how is that working as far as, you know, time in the day and time in the week goes?
It's a lot of time.
It is a lot of time. So our team as a whole picked different times that we wanted to be able to offer optional meeting times with students. And so our first couple weeks, Carrie and I did 25-minute, optional drop-ins for every section. So that's 4 main math sections. And then last week we tried okay, so whoever wants to come at this time, come at this time, and whoever wants to come at this time, come at this time, and kind of forgot about who was in what class. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because we actually had more participation, just giving them kind of more freedom.
Right.
And so that was really well. Looking at students who have turned in work before it was required, we had 50% of students working on math work. So we were pretty impressed for it not being required to have 50%.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I will just say that having listened to some presentations from teachers at Cornell and IC who are going through the same thing you're going through with a lot of the same challenges, they're actually also reporting a higher participation rate than they ever got in person from college students who, of course, have different sleep patterns. But, you know, thank you for making it relevant. Thank you for making it caring. And thanks for, you know, taking even extra time to share this with the board and the community.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This is Ann here. I want to also just kind of echo Pat and thank you so much for what you're doing and for the care that you're taking with the kids. And one of the things that jumped out at me with what you were saying is that kids in this setting actually are asking you questions and more, you know, are more comfortable actually asking you what they don't understand. And I'm curious how that, what lesson you take from that, like going forward. Like, is there something that from this process that you could apply at some other point with classes, you know, when, you know, in regular classroom experience?
Yeah, I think a big piece is we answer so many questions automatically in class because we know the questions students normally are going to have. And so this has been, I feel like, harder for kids because we're not right there with them all the time. And so they're just asking us questions because they know they can't go any further if they don't get their question answered. I don't know, Carrie, if you've noticed.
No, I mean, I think having the small sessions too, like later in the week, where there's like drop-in for strictly kids that, you know, want some extra help with things too. Some of that's been nice because it's like a small setting for students to do that. And they also get a lot of attention from us in a nice little ratio too. Like, you know, there'll be like a handful of kids with both of your teachers giving you their full attention. And I think that's just a nice thing that they get to experience with it as well.
Thanks.
Hey, Carrie. Hey, Jordan. Good to see you guys in real life. Thank you for working with the babies. This is Eldred. I was also part of the team that came to visit you. And I remember distinctly one of the most promising aspects of your work, of course, is that this is a collapsed class. We're trying to get all the kids prepared in some more even-handed form for critical math skills later. And one method you were using to get to that was obviously team building and having the kids work in different leveled up or leveled down teams. I would like you to help us understand if that is now irrelevant because the whole group is a team, or what elements of that aspect of your work have you been able to continue, or do you expect to be able to continue? Thank you. I'm on mute now.
All right. Eldred, thanks for your sensitivity to the athletic field. I have to say my heart is a little broken with hearing the tennis courts are getting locked. But aside from that, sorry. But so some students, so we've been able to offer some leveled and differentiated work in this online platform. So that's one way where I feel like we're still supporting students where they're at. One nice thing has been that kids have been helping each other in the stream. So in the Google Classroom, there's, you know, a stream where you can comment on assignments, and it's been nice because students have been giving each other like ideas on, oh, this works better on the computer, or, you know, a particular skill. So I do see them supporting each other, you know, in this platform still. There was a student who came on during one of the help sessions last week with Jordy, and what she said to you, she's like, I don't need any help. I'm just here to hang out. It's kind of like, so I feel like even in the extra help sessions, it's not necessarily just the kids, you know, who typically maybe would need extra support. But
I think something that was cool too is there was a student who came on Wednesday, and Carrie had gone through the entire problem with this student. And then on Friday, they came to our other drop-in, and another student had the same question. And I was like, hey, why don't you go through and show them how to do it? And they just felt so good and confident, like sharing how to do it because then they understood it. And it was just a really easy way of allowing another student to work with someone. And it was like, as we guide them through like the kind of questions to ask and, you know, what information to share.
It's not perfect. I still like being face to face with the kids, you know, but I think, you know, it's definitely better than I thought it would go.
Hi, Carrie and Jordy. This is Moira Lang. I want to thank you so much for what you're doing and for taking time to share it with us. And at the curriculum committee yesterday, we had a couple of other teachers from DeWitt, Michael Treat and Callie, was it Callie Bryant? Yeah. Share with us, and I'm just, it's just been great to see it in this concrete fashion. And one thing that they explicitly talked about yesterday, and that you're sort of suggesting that there are some silver linings that you didn't expect to have happen in terms of things happening for kids, or the collaboration that goes on between teachers that are good for right now, and then I think also will be good, you know, moving forward when we get back into a building together. So
yeah, I definitely agree. I think as teachers, it is built in us to be fixers. So we find a way to fix whatever problems arise, and we just kind of keep going. You can't stop.
Well, thanks again.
Hello, Jordan and Carrie. This is Sean Eversley Bradwell. Let me add to the thank you from my colleagues as well. And my thank you to your colleagues. I'm sure you all have been in touch as well. This is a change, as we all know, with delivery of instruction. One of the things that I'm struggling with as an instructor is reaching a particular 5% of my students. And so while it's definitely pushing me to be innovative, and there's things that I did not anticipate that are going well, that are going much better. And I think, as you indicate, I'm shocked by the level of eagerness and engagement from students that are actively looking to participate and want additional classes. And yet there's still a 5 to 10% of the student population that I cannot reach. And so I'm wondering if that is also your experience, and maybe what are you or folks in your school, your colleagues doing to try to reach out to, you know, the students that are a little bit more difficult to engage in this medium.
I know at DeWitt, if we hadn't heard from a student yet, we were calling our home bases. And so we were making those connections with kids. If we still didn't hear from them, we would try, you know, calling again, sending an email, figuring out what form of communication was going to work. I know Carrie spent a lot of time calling families as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of it was just that, like, repeated reaching out, and texting sometimes was better with some people. And sometimes I think the parents just needed a chance to just talk about what was going on in their household. Like, you can hear like the babies crying in the background. Like, there's just, life is going on, you know? So yeah, sometimes Jordan's house where there's a baby crying in the background. And, you know, so, you know, when I talk to families, I mean, I do want kids to engage in the academics, but first and foremost, I think just families being able to take care of each other is the message that we're trying to convey, you know, and what they need, you know, and just making sure that that's done first. And I feel, I'm not sure if there's anybody, I mean, I think we've been able to get a hold of everybody. Mm-hmm. Getting everyone to participate all the time. This is our first week where, you know, the activities are supposed to not be as optional, and we're starting new curriculum. So I'm not sure if we know what our percentage is yet of buy-in, because when things aren't mandatory, like some kids just are like, hey, we don't have to do this, right? And I'm like, well, you don't have to, but I really like it. So I think we don't have a sense of who that percent is quite yet. I think we'll have a better idea in another week or two.
Mm-hmm. And as a team, we've already talked about, you know, coming together and figuring out who's heard from who's gotten work from who, so that we're keeping track of it at a team level, but then it's also happening at a building level, so that the A team can then work with those families and see what do they need to be successful.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Anyone else for Carrie and Jordy?
Yes, this is Eldred again. Can you help us understand the work that went into putting together the schedule that you're using? Again, someone mentioned we spoke to 2 of your colleagues yesterday, and they helped us work through that from their perspective.
Yes.
Can you guys share that as well?
Sure.
Yeah, so at a 6th grade level, we're actually on Team Phoenix. And so we definitely are a group of teachers who like to have a schedule in general. So starting like a few weeks ago, like 3 weeks ago, we came up with a schedule and we all said, hey, like what time works best for you? And we just kind of mapped it out.
We just started making our own.
Yeah. And
as a
then
team of teachers.
We were talking to, we call them super core, but it's like your practical arts, health, music, FCS, art, all of them. And, you know, we just said, when can you or when do you want to meet with our kids? And we gave them space as well, because they're all our kids. And, you know, we just have to work together to meet the needs of everyone. And so we've tried to keep as open communication as possible. We invited, Callie Bryant actually is one of the department leaders. So we invited her to our 6th grade team meeting last week to kind of finish hammering it out, knowing that Learning 2.0 was coming. And so it was done at our building by grade level.
Thank you.
Anyone else right now? If not, Carrie, Jordy, outstanding job. Really, really appreciate you spending time with us tonight. I certainly look forward to the time when you are back in the classroom and back on the tennis court. So,
yay! Thank
exactly. You. That will be a great day. Really appreciate what you do for the kids in this community. Thank you for spending some time with us tonight and all that you do.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and thanks for all the work you guys do as a board. You spend a lot of late nights, and we appreciate that too.
Have a good night, ladies. Appreciate that.
All right. Good night, everybody.
That's been intensifying significantly.
And Sean, are we sharing the screen again?
That's a great question. I'll leave that open to Chris. I've made Chris a co-host, so if there's anything he wants to share, he should feel free. And actually, I apologize, Chris, if I'm putting you in the spot. I don't know if Amanda's doing the capital project update or you.
I am ready to do that update and share my screen.
Great. Right, and that's where we're gonna just roll right into the capital project update. And Chris and Amanda will give us some dialogue here and some stuff, Chris. And we mentioned it before, but the capital projects are starting back up again. If you've been by Ithaca High, the dumpsters are out there. They're starting to do work on the Welcome Center. We talked about the track being closed. Well, frankly, the track and the stadium are going to be a work site shortly. So that will be closed off, frankly, the rest of the summer. So we won't really have to worry about that. But other projects will be starting up in the near coming days. So and working on those schedules. And so I'll let Amanda and Chris take over here for a bit.
Chris, I'm just checking to make sure that everybody can hear me. Otherwise, I'm your backup singer for the evening.
I can hear you, Amanda.
I still
Great,
want to hear
thanks.
the backup singing, but I can hear you too, Amanda.
Gotcha, Amanda.
Yeah, that's great to have such support. So I'm not sure if folks can see the screen. I have the agenda up at the moment and a
Yes,
plan
we can see it.
of, I guess that's Boynton, which we'll get to in a little bit. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to touch on phase 1, which is in construction, phase 2, which is in the design phase, and then finish up with a couple of the other projects. There's a roofing project, project at the middle schools to improve the HVAC controls, and we'll touch on some potential locations for adult-sized changing tables at the end. So if you have questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll just keep going and we can take questions at the end. Conversations about social distancing for contractors and how to keep their personnel safe and healthy and doing work. So the construction started in the pool area at the high school, which is Area C. That is ongoing. And we are now looking at the empty shell of a pool, which has had its tile removed. We've discovered a little additional material there, so there may be some additional work that we'll be asking contractors to do, but we are working on figuring that out. Area B, which is what will be the welcome center at the high school, that is also under construction. They're doing demolition work in there as well. So amidst the guidance that was being issued by the state, for a short period, there was some stoppage of work, but that was clarified and we're going. So a lot of what's happening for phase 1 construction is just logistics around how to keep construction making progress with social distancing and other safety procedures. One of the things that we're looking at is being able to release the fields, so Moresco Field and Stadium, a little bit earlier than what we anticipated. So in some cases we're able to, I'm not sure that we will be able to improve the overall schedule, but at least allow work to begin starting. And hopefully that can mitigate some of the difficulties that are posed with social distancing when contractors are working. So for example, someone's on a ladder, one of their coworkers is holding that ladder, right? So there are some kind of basic safety things and ways of working that mostly in Area B, we will be running into and working through with contractors as they get more bodies in a smaller space. Also, there are discussions about the transportation potentially starting a little bit earlier than what was originally scheduled. The remainder of the areas of the building, both at the high school and at the elementary schools, which are receiving improvements to their secure vestibules, those were scheduled to start in the summer of this year. So in, right after the end of school. So those are currently, they remain on that same schedule. If there is guidance that school will no longer come back in the spring of 2020, then we are getting ready and having conversations about how we might release more space for contractors to work out so they can sort of spread out. So that's a very quick overview on phase 1 of construction, and we're moving forward. Moving to phase 2, which is in the design phase. We are relatively early on in that design phase, and we haven't had any meetings in person for a little while, but as was mentioned earlier, we are having the owner, architect, construction manager meetings remotely and continue to move ahead on those projects as well. A couple of the adjustments that I'd like to point out to the scope of phase 2 that have happened over the last month or two. I'd like to highlight that at the middle schools, one of the previous scopes of work included renovating the main office areas, and we've stepped back from that after sort of digging into that and realizing that wasn't as much of a priority. We are keeping the renovation to the bathrooms in those areas in the scope of work, as well as the security entrance. So those pieces of the work will remain. We have added some food service related scope of work. We had a good walk through a couple of the buildings with Beth Krause and some of her staff, which resulted in some equipment requests at DeWitt. But as far as the capital project, most of the work is at Boynton. The serving area at Boynton Middle School is landlocked, so to speak, with inside the building, and does not have any windows outside like the DeWitt serving area does. So we'll be looking at some renovations in that space and opening that up to the cafeteria a little bit more and revising how they serve food there a little bit. As well, at Boynton, there is proposed an outbuilding, a small outbuilding on that location that will house the existing freezer that lives over in the Hancock Street facility. Currently, staff takes time to transport food from that freezer over to Boynton, and there's a lot of back and forth. So from an efficiency standpoint, moving that existing freezer over makes a lot of sense because Boynton does do so much cooking for the district and for the community. And so as a community member, I'd like to thank you as well for continuing your food service for the community. So that outbuilding will hold freezer and some dry storage area, and we'll be back kind of behind those baseball fields near the school building. Also, as we've looked at the initial construction cost estimates that are provided by our partners at Campus Construction Managers, we have seen that some of the site work that was originally proposed at LACS, at Bell Sherman, and at the Bell Sherman Annex was over the maximum cost allowances, which would result in the district, a portion of that project not being fully aidable by the district, which is something we want to try to avoid. So we're making an adjustment now. We're early on enough in the design process that we can scale back a little bit of that work to bring it back in line with the maximum cost allowances. So those are most of the adjustments to phase 2. There's certainly other scope items in there as well that we're moving forward with. We have also a roofing project in the design phase, which is at the high school, which is re-roofing a substantial part of the high school that will be occurring the summer of 2020 and the summer of 2021. We're full steam ahead on that and anticipate submitting that to the state within the next couple months for, as I said, summer construction in 2020. Sorry, in 2021 and 2022. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. We are also beginning in kind of a pre-design phase and trying to figure out exactly what the scope is at Boynton and DeWitt middle schools. There has been some ongoing and a little bit accelerating issue with temperature control, primarily in the classrooms. So Train has done some work in helping to figure out how to solve that. We have, so that's what I actually want to show on the screen here. So I'm going to move this off. We have identified that at Boynton Middle School, which is on the screen now, the areas in green basically are classrooms where we propose to improve the mechanical control system. So not to get into the weeds, but it's original to the building from 1972. So it's served a nice long life and has been helped along by your facility staff for sure to be able to even last this long. But that's a pneumatic system and it's leaking essentially. So we'll be replacing that with a digital system, which is modern day equivalent of that kind of system. So the green areas are what we're planning on. The orange areas are the music classrooms where I understand there also have been some complaints about temperature control. So we're looking at those and what needs to be done since those are supplied from a different penthouse in the building, mechanical penthouse. And the red areas are areas where we understand there's been more recent work. There aren't particular complaints that we've heard about, but that could be included in the project as well. And if that's part of what we're trying to balance here is the speed with which we can design and implement this project versus the scope of the project. So if we are going to include these red areas, we're going to have to go out and do a little bit more field work, and we can do that. It just might affect the schedule. At Boynton, this is the second floor plan. So basically these areas, the gymnasium, the cafeteria, some of those other ancillary spaces are not currently in the scope of what we've figured out, how to fix it. Moving to Boynton, it's very similar. There's very similar buildings that the green areas represent areas that are currently in the scope and other areas that are pending. Then I would like to share now the result of a walkthrough that Amanda Verba and Paul Alexander and I did some weeks ago to review the high school, LACS, and Boynton and DeWitt middle schools to locate bathroom facilities that would be able to accommodate adult-sized changing tables. So at the high school, there are a couple bathrooms here near the cafeteria that were identified that could accept those, that would require some modification to one of the stalls in the back that actually would allow privacy, because what we were looking for ideally was single user bathrooms to allow someone with an assistant to go in there and have a reasonable level of privacy. The bathrooms at the high school are relatively small, so we did find these that would that we could have a stall that would be large enough that two people could fit into it and actually would have its own sink. So we felt like that was the next best thing to allow privacy and amenities. At LACS, Deb Patacater she was way ahead of us and had already identified a bathroom which is on the lower level, which is actually in relative close proximity to some of the spaces that serve special education programs. And there's single user bathroom there that could be modified to accommodate that. At Boynton Middle School, we identified a couple bathrooms that are over near the cafeteria that are still multi-user bathrooms, but are much smaller and so could potentially afford more privacy. At DeWitt Middle School, there is a bathroom downstairs, which currently is a faculty bathroom that could potentially serve another use. As well, there is another bathroom upstairs that is a faculty bathroom, similarly that could accept adult-sized changing tables without much modification. So that's a quick update. Any questions on any of those items?
Anything for Chris?
Hi, this is.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
This is Pat. I do have one item when you were talking about some of the heating and cooling and having Train into look. We had that performance energy contract a few years ago, and I'm wondering, is there overlap with any of the inefficiencies that you're seeing that earlier contract might cover, and are you considering that possibility?
Yes, the work done in 2008 in the mechanical penthouse replaced some of the mechanical units up there, and we will be making some minor modifications to some of those units. We will also be doing some construction that closes off. There are sort of gaps in the floor, so we believe that some of it is actually original construction, is not very tight and is allowing some air to be flowing through the building, and sort of bypassing the mechanical system, which gets the air to the right place at the right time at the right temperature in theory. So we'll be addressing some of those issues as well.
I just, and maybe some of my colleagues who are on facilities could facilitate the answer too, that are any of these issues something that should have been picked up by the energy audit that we spent taxpayer money on a few years ago? Or is this all totally different?
I don't know if Rob wants to speak to it, but part of my understanding is some of these things that we're experiencing are actually the result of the energy performance contract, that we have a number of different mediums trying to operate together. And when you take 60-year-old buildings and try to retrofit them, that we're trying to find ways in which to all get it to one system. Rob and Amanda and Chris, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right, Sean. That's one of the certainly main issues with Boyne and DeWitt was the digital controls that were added. The energy performing contract certainly has went a long way to saving a lot of energy for the district and the taxpayers. We cut our energy bills fairly dramatically, and Amanda can have the numbers, but it's we talked about this in the past, I think, Pat, but we married digital controls with a pneumatic system that is indeed something that's been around for probably about 100 years. So, and 60 years for these buildings, or however long it's been. But it's really an old control system that was driven by air compared to a digital control system that obviously is run in a much different way. And so we have to go back, and this piece of the energy performance contract was not done to go back and go through Boynton and DeWitt and update the building-wide system, and not an add-on, but really going back and updating the system back to the back to the source, basically, right?
Okay.
So that's the deal.
Very helpful to the least technical person on your board. Thank you.
No, and basically, Pat, we're trying to figure out how much is it going to cost to fix these systems once and for all. Not a stopgap, but as I've asked Chris, is this the final fix, not a stopgap to get us to a final fix? And so they're pricing that out, and we'll see what this will cost. But definitely has to be a priority in our capital projects.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rob, Pat, it's also a good reminder that, since we have such a transient community as well, that the district went through and spent significant amounts of money with the energy performance contract to try to make sure our buildings were as energy efficient as possible. A number of that included sealing up windows, taking a look at the ways in which our boilers work and operate. And so we did a number of things, and Rob, the amount of money is leaving me. I want to say, well, I'll leave the amount for someone else to discuss.
It was in the $10 million range, and certainly lighting was a big issue as well.
Yep, right. So that's what I thought. So that was like 11 million. So significant amounts of money spent on the building infrastructure to try to make our buildings as energy efficient as possible. It also included us taking a look at different energy options to be sort of both carbon neutral or more, you know, for lack of a better word, trying to think about different things. I'm sure we'll get into that momentarily, and this is not the purpose of this conversation we're having now. But I do know that not everyone who's listening was around when we went through that fairly significant energy performance contract.
Right. Other questions for Chris on the first pieces? Chris, do you have a bit more for us to hear about?
Sorry, could you say that again, Rob?
Is there more that you're going to share with us tonight?
That was my presentation. I'm happy to go into more depth if you'd like on things.
Okay. And I would just only add, Chris, we have talked about the Enfield and doing a different solution to replace the boiler out there. You might want to just do a quick update there, and then we'll let you go.
Great. Yeah, at Enfield, we began looking at the boiler system there since we understood that it was aging out and at the point where its serviceable life was coming to an end. So we started with thinking about, you know, replacing those boilers in kind. That's on they're not municipal services other than electricity out there. So that's a building that's currently being heated with I believe it's propane. So, you know, trucks come in and fill the tank. So we looked also at a geothermal well field paired with heat pumps to be able to heat that school. And we performed a life cycle cost analysis, again, in conjunction with our partners for cost estimating, to look at the payback for that and comparative energy savings and construction cost values. So what we found through that study was that although the geothermal system, which includes, you know, drilling into the ground, probably on the order of 500 feet down into the ground is pretty typical, to have a well field that you can extract and exchange heat between the building and the ground. It's a very efficient way of providing essentially an energy source for that. And using heat pump technology, which a lot of homes in this area are beginning to receive more and more through some of the county and other initiatives out there. So using that technology, schools have definitely done it before, and we're making some assumptions about you know, what energy costs are going to do, what the current efficiency of the building envelope is. We haven't done an exhaustive study of that, but making some reasonable assumptions. We think the payback for that appears to be on the order of 10 years or so, which makes a lot of sense when you're thinking about bonding a project for 18 years. So it seemed to fit within that window and gets you off of that carbon source. There would still be electrical usage in the building, and heat pumps actually, you know, your electricity use would increase because that's an electric-based heating source. So down the road, the next step could be solar to address that if your goal is to decarbonize a building. So this is taking one step toward that.
No, thanks, Chris. If there's no other questions for Chris, we'll let Chris go. Thanks, Chris. There's much work going on and much more work to do.
Yes, we're able to keep going, and we're pleased to do it. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Amanda, we'll just keep rolling. Budget update.
Okay. Yep, and Dr. Brown is going to, I think, start us off, and then I'm going to jump in.
Go ahead.
Tricia, go ahead, Dr. Brown.
No, I'm saying just go ahead and get started, man. I'll jump in. We'll tag team this one if that's all right.
That sounds great. Fantastic. Tricia, if you don't mind, I'm wondering if you want to present, or I can present myself too, whichever works for you.
Sure, I can present. I can go ahead and
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So thanks everyone for the time this evening. I know that it's 8:40 already, so we'll do the best that we can to get through the presentation together. Essentially what we're going to be doing is reviewing to date what we know and also what we don't know. And we're going to be looking at a review of some of the budget additions that we discussed the last time we were together. I think was actually physically together, and then efficiencies to date that we've been working on to ensure that you know, we're moving the process along, mindful of some of the new information that we received from the state, as well as where we are in the process. So with that, Tricia, we'll be on slide 3, which is the what we know. And so what we know is that we have essentially right now foundation aid frozen at prior year amounts, which is last year. The governor essentially announced that we would not be receiving any increases to foundation aid, which is the formula aid, one of the major portions of state aid. We also know that the governor adjusted everyone's budgets across the state in the same amount that we will be receiving federal aid from the stimulus package. And they're calling it a pandemic adjustment. And so for Ithaca, that means that we will be essentially losing $1 million of state aid, but then gaining it back in federal aid. So it's net neutral in terms of the money loss and then getting it back. But in terms of state aid, that $1 million loss could carry forward to next year and restart us at a lower amount. That is yet to be seen. The number of other aids amounts are locked in actually back to the 15-16 rate. And when we go to the next slide, you'll be able to see that. And then also we know that we discussed in our miscellaneous revenue that one of the things that we actually were able to work on last year due to some great consultants was that we were able to reinvest monies under the laws that govern school districts, and we're able to get interest on those earnings of those investments. And unfortunately, due to the demise in the economy right now, those are projected to be significantly decreased. The one thing that we don't know are the what the governor is referring to as quarterly adjustments. We will know toward the end of this month. He essentially has stated that if New York State, the state itself, is missing their mark on revenue coming into the state due to decreased state taxes, retail taxes, and sales tax due to monies that are being spent to respond to COVID and many other reasons that you know, we would be seeing less revenue and increased expenses. The governor is going to be, he has essentially promised that schools will be considered as an area for the governor to sort of make the state whole, and the Department of Budget will jump in and determine how that will be done or if that will be done. So we will know soon toward the end of April what that will look like for us, but that is something that we're all sort of getting ready for, kind of putting our seatbelts on and getting ready for the ride. Tricia, the next slide, please, if you don't mind. Thank you. So this is the breakdown of state aid. I'm just going to give you a moment to take a look. I've reviewed that on the prior slide in terms of narrative form, but this is sort of what the numbers look like. You'll see that all other aid amount is where that adjustment is back to the 15-16 amount, and you'll see the foundation aid locked in, and then you'll see that pandemic adjustment. Tricia, next slide. Thank you. This slide shows the state aid line that was from the prior slide. So I took that and made that the first row. So that's representative just in one line, what you just saw. You'll see the property taxes. Those are not impacted due to what we're seeing across the nation and the state. The property tax assessments occurred, and we sort of know what our levy amount is due to the calculation. There were no changes to the tax cap calculation. Other revenue. This is where we have placed that pandemic adjustment that will come to us in federal dollars that will offset the state aid decrease. And so that's why you're seeing that increase there in other revenue. Other revenue is also where we receive our BOCES refund, our Medicaid reimbursements, which will be down, our interest earnings, which unfortunately will also be down. So although we're receiving $1 million in that line for the pandemic adjustment, that line really should have tracked a little bit higher than the remaining $400,000 that makes up that line. But in fact, we're not tracking the way that we would in a year that we wouldn't have a pandemic. And again, I didn't sort of lead in by saying I want to recognize that while we're doing this, I really appreciate the fact that we're still talking about the district operations, given that people are really, we are much more concerned about health and safety of families and community right now than we are about financials. So I really appreciate you honoring just a moment to talk about this. The fund balance there, as you can see, that will fluctuate as we work through the remaining slides of this presentation and in the next weeks to come. That fund balance, remember, is sort of the amount of money that we will take from savings accounts to balance the budget. And our goal is always to track that down, right? We want to use as few fund balance dollars as possible and reserve dollars as possible to balance the budget. And so this is a moment in time. That is why at the top of this slide we have a date, and we will continue to date it as we do our work and our due diligence and work with our principals and directors and the executive team and the board to drive our expenses down. At this moment in time, this represents what the expenses are for the budget that we have at this date. Tricia, the next slide, please.
Before, can we go back, please?
Sure, Sean.
My apologies. So
no, thank you for jumping in.
We're looking at this revenue projection. We're having conversations about a global pandemic and the possibility of a recession that harkens back to the Great Depression. And yet we are looking at some of our, like, how do I want to say this? Is there a presumption that even while we are in our legal right to set the tax levy, that we will actually be able to gather $92 million in tax revenue? Or that there will be other revenues that won't be decreased as each month goes by. I'm just trying to get a better understanding. I know what our estimated budget is. I'm just trying to get a better understanding of how we're moving forward.
So I'm going to answer it. I believe I understand. I want to make sure that I'm going to answer it properly. So if I don't catch it right, just, step in there, Sean, okay? So for the way that the property tax cap line, right? So that's the levy amount that will be spread across the shoulders of the taxpayers, right? So we have always had a very healthy Tompkins County and Ithaca proper. We've had an excellent growth and development here. And so therefore, every year when we calculate our amount of property tax levy, those shoulders of the taxpayers have increased every year, so much so that actually the amount of money that we're paying per thousand has gone down, right? Because we've just been so healthy. I think to get to your point, what we don't know yet is the impact not of the levy, because the levy is set by a formula, but the rate that we as taxpayers will be paying, because we just don't know after all of this is said and done, what taxable entities will still be there to provide the shoulders to share the burden to the taxpayers. Did that sort of get at what you were thinking?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think we have a lot of conversations about the tax rate and the tax levy and the fact that we've been paying less in this community per thousand than any other community in the county, if I'm not mistaken. And so that part I get, given the fact that our assessments are fairly significant. I guess what I'm also interested in is just how we're moving forward, and this may come up later as well, that we are considering an increase in our budget for next year, even while it may not be what we bring in.
Right, and that's absolutely right. So that gap, we're constantly tracking that gap of what our real revenue is compared to our expenditures, and then utilizing fund balance in a manner that is realistic, right? That it is actually sustainable, that we are able to refund it, that we're able to use it for support for the what ifs or the second or third tier spending versus sort of the essentials. And we are absolutely working together as an executive team and principals and directors to come up with ideas to track this estimated budget number downward so that we don't become dependent on fund balance. Because for the long term, you are correct, with this state of the economy right now, that would not be smart for us to do as a district, because the minute you start to dip into that fund balance to pay for operations instead of just putting it there as sort of a balancing mechanism, that's where when you use it, it will no longer be there to dip into the next year. So there is some conversation about growth and then also efficiency, Sean, in the next few slides.
Hey,
I'm sorry.
If I were to chime in, just Amanda really spoke to it, looking at next year and not long term, because expenses will continue to go up. And you mentioned it earlier, with the assessments going up, we should be in a good place to have the revenue come in to match those expenses, looking strictly at next year. But long term, we wouldn't be able to speak to that, if that answers your question at all.
Helpful,
Well,
Chris. Thank you.
Well, I have a question, and maybe I'm missing something here, but about property tax. What if a whole bunch of people just are not able to pay it come next fall? They have a tax bill, but they don't have the money for it.
So what happens for tax collection, right, is that everybody that has a taxable property receives a tax bill, or they can, I think that there are, moments in the law where they're allowed to sort of state that their assessed value is not accurate, or they can request a pilot. So there's obviously all those opportunities under the law for that. However, when somebody receives a tax bill, it's not, unfortunately, there's no mechanism to say, is this fair or can you afford it? What happens is that there's 3 terms, right? Each one of them has a penalty added to it as they go each month. So we start in October 1st, then the first penalty period is November 1, and then it's December 1, and then by January 1, if you haven't paid your tax bills, what happens is that the Tompkins County actually will sort of take on those bills and become the collection agency. They make the district whole, but they then handle the collection of those taxes with those entities or taxpayers themselves. And the district is, we're essentially not involved in that process. That's on the county itself.
And Moira, to add to that, if you're looking at a potential $136 million proposed budget, it would have to be a considerable amount of the population not to pay their taxes in order to impact us. So that would have to be huge.
Well, Chris, to that point, and to Amanda's detailed explanation, thank you for that, about how this has worked in the past. I'm looking at the state aid percentage change down by 3% or 2.5%. I'd be willing to bet quite a bit that the property tax levies are going to be quite a bit higher than that, right? And I don't know at what point will the county itself scream that they can't cover it, but I think it would be worth our while to investigate all of these possibilities. What if it's 6%? What if it's 7%? What if it's 8%? At what point is the county also not going to be able to operate in the way they've operated in the past? Thanks.
And then let's get to the next few slides where we get at some of the efficiency things we think about doing in addition.
Sure. So this is just a simple review, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on here. When we came to you, I think, it feels like a long time ago, but it was probably just about a month ago. And when we were together, we talked about some of the additions that we were putting into the budget to achieve our goals for curriculum and instruction and for our students' experience in our buildings. And you can see them here. We actually, we had negotiated contracts. We're doing heterogeneous math, and continuing to roll that out into upper grades. We wanted to support literacy. We wanted to expand elementary art and music, and we wanted to always utilize BOCES, and those always have sort of like just a general cost of living experience increase. These are still in the budget for your information, just so you know. We did not cut things that we felt would achieve our goals. The next slide, Tricia, if you don't mind. Now we're going from additions to efficiencies. So since we last met and we knew what the state was sort of telling us about some of the challenges that we were going to be facing in terms of revenue, these are some of the ideas that we've been coming up with. This slide is about the staffing ideas, and these are actually in the budgeted number right now. So they actually have a value to them, which has been subtracted and taken out of the budget. So we're looking at increased elementary class sizes. Nothing crazy. I mean, we're at 18.3, I think, right now, and we're looking to go up to like 18.7 or 18.9. We're looking at secondary offerings, and either through attrition or retirements, or even just the fact that class schedules, you know, can allow us to sort of maybe cut back on some things and offer some fewer offerings. We're looking at that. We're the TOSA model that we have, which is an instructional coach in every single building. We will be reducing that. There will be a few that stay, but most of that they will go back into the classroom, take their learnings, and do an amazing work in front of young people. We're going to think about clerical shares, communication staffing. You know, that position right now is vacant. We won't fill it, and we're also going to be looking to even do more. We're looking at MEI, which is the Master Educator of Inclusion, the model that we went to last year, sharing some of the MEI work, which is sort of the CSE chairperson work, traditionally with the Director of Special Education. Sheila, as you all know, is retiring. We're looking at sort of a combined model of someone who can lead that department, but also do some of the hands-on work, still be on the ground, you know, being with families and with students. And then finally using district administrators to serve as admin subs. This is staffing ideas that we have for budget efficiencies that are in the budget right now. The next one is those things that are not staffing. We've discussed this before. The underwriter for our retiree Medicare eligible folks, we went out for some quotes and bids, and we actually analyzed that through our Health Insurance Advisory Council, and we found that Aetna actually has a better product that offers silver sneakers and international travel along with all the coverage that we are used to, and so that will actually be a savings to the district. Professional development, both in-house as well as with BOCES. Fund balance is built throughout the budget, especially in special education and facilities. And we, Angela and I have gone through and essentially tried to obliterate cushions where appropriate based on 3 to 5 year averages, and really did a comb through of everything. Reduction of water remediation, Paul's team has been doing work in all the buildings. We agreed that we didn't need as much as we had. And then BOCES reopened their budget for us, that we are able to actually resubmit what our proposals were for the services that we wanted. They've also decreased the admin fee from, I think it was upwards of 5% when they presented to you as a board. They're actually capping it at 2% because they know the challenges we're facing. We worked with a lot of the budget developers that have BOCES services, so Sheila, Zach, Lynn, and they're working to look at their BOCES budget amounts and cut those back. And then in the box there, I think this is the most important thing. To be healthy moving forward, you must start work now. And so we are working with principals and directors right now in this current year to end the year as strong as possible. They are asked to evaluate all of their encumbrances, which are monies that essentially they put on hold or set aside to spend, to truly see if they actually need to spend it. And so they will be evaluating their potential spending to see if they actually really need to do that, therefore ending the year hopefully in a positive manner. And that way we have that amount of money that we can then carry forward to the next year to continue the operations and sustain programs that are so important to us. Questions, thoughts, and other suggestions?
Hey, Amanda.
Tricia, do you mind just going back one? Thanks so much, Tricia.
Ann here, just a couple questions. One is under budget efficiencies, you have reduction of fund balance. So I just had a question on that because I don't know if you mentioned that or I just missed it. And the other question was back to also about fund balance. On the prior slide, the amount that we'd be using in fund balance, what would we have remaining in fund balance if we use the amount that you have allocated for that?
So, Anne, the first question is on this slide, and that fund balance. Like I said, we build in cushions, right? Or for like, really, it is fund balance all throughout our budget, so that it is there for things that come up that we were not anticipating, or things that may likely occur, and it's just smart to do. What we did was we actually looked at all of those and cut them back as much as possible, so that we really don't have a lot of wiggle room, right? We're going to live with a very clear budget that sort of, this is what we've allocated and this is what we're going to spend, and we're going to do position control, and we're going to be creative with our ideas. And so therefore we don't have like a money line item to go to as we would in years prior. And then your question about how much fund balance will we have if we use what we have, and the only answer that is honest to you is to say that it really depends on how we close this year. So we have in our audit reports, we always report our reserve amounts, and we report the capped 4%, which is the unallocated, unrestricted fund balance that we're allowed to sort of keep with no strings attached, but the comptroller sort of asks us to cap it at 4%. Right now we have about $3 million in there, and then we have an additional about $4 to $5 million in a variety of reserves. Again, those have sort of strings attached to them. So we have allocated fund balance that we would hopefully carry forward to next year. Depending on how we end the year, that could be more or less, and then we add in the monies from the reserves and the unallocated fund balance. So I'm sorry for the answer that I have to give, but the reality is it's right now too soon to tell.
My concern, the reason I'm asking the question is that in the next year, undoubtedly, the way the economy looks, we're going to need that fund balance again. So I guess my concern is that if we, use it up, we won't have it in the future as, to provide us for flexibility. So I guess how do we retain enough in there so that we have flexibility if things actually get worse?
Yeah, I think we're being thoughtful. I mean, in some ways, it's been referred to as a rainy day fund. Well, it's raining, and we are using some this year. We anticipate using some additional funds next year. But we also, again, you've been leading this effort for us for a long time now. We need to start advocating at the state and national level for additional fundings as well. Increasing our revenue is going to be important right now. So we have a little bit of a window to use our fund balance, but that won't last much longer.
Anything else for Amanda before we move?
Quick question, leaders, if we're going to use the fund balance, we know how precious that is. You reminded us over and over. What would be the priority? What would be your priorities as if we have to dip into that at all? Thank you.
Help me clarify the question. What would be the priority as far as what we do as far as programs and offerings, or our priorities as far as which fund balances we touch? Help me understand, clarify, please.
I think it was the second one. If we decide that not which one will we touch first. If we have to dip into the current unrestricted fund balance, which you've explained would cost us, right, moving forward, is there a set of priorities that would guide us into those decisions?
Amanda, what are your initial thoughts there? I mean, you know the different fund balances very well. What would you suggest?
So Eldred, we always, so the reserves, right, we're always try to use. So the next finance committee, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a good look at the reserve accounts and see what we can leverage. So we always use the reserve accounts each year to help with some of the like ERS costs. And the TRS costs now are allowable as a reserve. So those are good things to use, and they're very appropriate. As far as the unreserved, so the money that, like, sort of the no strings attached, right? So the unallocated fund balance that's capped at that 4% by the state comptroller. I think really what I'm hearing you ask is sort of like, how are we going to prioritize the work that we do? And for us, I think all of us is we want the young people in Ithaca City School District to have a quality education, right? And we value our staff and we value our local elementary schools. We've gone through sort of those priorities time and again. Every time we're meeting about the budget, we remind ourselves what those pillars are of the work that we do and what makes us Ithaca City School District. And so that's what we try not to erode, right? We're gonna work tirelessly to get at everything else, and not erode sort of the who we are, who we strive, and then also who we strive to be. And we hope that those two things will have enough revenue to do that, right? But that's the work. Is that sort of getting at what you were thinking?
It is, but this is different than the conversations we used to have at some ungodly time with the previous administration that I will not remind anybody about, right? At some point, even if we're waiting to be made whole by someone out there, the feds or the state, there might come a point where we have to make a decision. Is there still going to be 2 FTEs in art and music? To what extent are we going to have to reduce professional development? I'm just trying to get a sense of whether or not there is a thought about prioritizing those absolutely critical elements of our operation. That's all.
Well,
and there may not be, because we want to save them all. So don't feel the need to answer. I just want to know if we had given that any thought. Thanks.
Yeah, and you've seen some of that tonight, and we've been here before. We're going to always strive to put together a budget that's going to meet the needs of our learners. So when we've been here before and what we're seeing right now, we are going to be adding programs at times, while at the same time we're going to be eliminating and finding efficiencies with other programs. So you're seeing that with this funding request, and that's how we'll continue to do the work. As our organization evolves, so do also our needs, and you're seeing that. But right now we feel like we're supporting our young people still, even in the midst of these fiscal challenges.
This is Pat, and I have a question for.
Right, Dr. Brown. And
oh, can you hear me? This is Pat.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
Go ahead, Pat.
I just have a question about the budget and the tax levy as Amanda's gone through, and while acknowledging that paying taxes are going to be harder for people than even in years past, the budget as you're presenting it and the increase stays beneath the tax cap, and all things being equal to past years, which they're not, but we have still in the past had enough growth so that economic growth in Tompkins County and Ithaca, so that even though the tax rate goes up, the tax levy would fall. So this would still see a reduction in an individual's tax bill if they haven't been reassessed. As
that is correct, Pat.
4 years. Okay. Well,
that is correct.
That's something. Thank you.
Amanda, I have another question for you, because related to the opportunities that Albany has to claw back state aid. And I think it's just important to acknowledge that it creates a very kind of complicated calculation, because it's hard to know. It's very unpredictable. And I think you mentioned there was about a maximum amount of money that the state could potentially just, you could just talk about that.
Sure. So,
And
Trisha,
also,
Go ahead, Amanda.
and I'm so sorry, I can't get the second part of it. I think you're asking me about sort of what the state can do to our state aid in terms of those quarterly adjustments. And Tricia, if you can just go to the next slide. So right now we don't know until April 30th what the quarterly adjustments will mean for us. And essentially what they're stating is that the maximum excuse me, the maximum amount for Ithaca City School District over the course of an entire year is about, I believe it's like $2.2 million. And there's a formula for calculating that. And essentially, I think it was the change in aid from a particular moment in time to the current moment in time. And then you would sort of divide that over the course of quarters, right? And so what we calculated, and we double checked and triple checked with our wonderful consultants, either Questar, BOCES, or Forecast 5, that the total amount would be for Ithaca 2.2 million. And so, you know, we'll be watching that. And again, we don't know yet until they actually place that quarterly adjustment on us. So it could be in April, it could be as bad as $550,000, or it could be much less or nothing. And this is the sort of the new world that we're walking in, or the familiar world if you did this, you know, back in the recession, that, you know, the unknowns are just as strong as sort of what we know to date. They're equal forces playing against one another.
So Amanda, this is Pat. So you're saying that Cuomo doesn't have a blank check to just grab anything back that he can, but it's 2-point-something million for the year.
There's from my understanding, and you know, and I can come back at the next time with sort of the overview of that. But my understanding is that it's actually a formula, like they often do from the state, that it's formulaically driven, and that there is a certain amount of money that they can cap us based on sort of the growth from prior years with our aid amounts. And my understanding is that the Department of Budget gets to determine essentially if and how they will want to claw that money back from school districts, if and how.
So I am just going to say, having lived through all the gap elimination adjustments, that might be the best news I've heard all night, that there is some kind of limit that's like under $6 million. And I don't say that lightly, because we lost something on the level of $20 million over those years that we had that. But that, I don't know how anyone else is taking this, but I'm breathing a little sigh of relief, and it's helping to put your efficiencies in a more manageable light. And I realize that's for this year, and we don't know what's coming, but thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just to add to that in terms of the legislative advocacy piece, what I think the governor is trying to do is tie the aid that gets passed along to local, to the schools, to anything that the federal government might give to states. And so the recommendation is that we advocate to our federal representatives or congresspeople, senators, and try to bring, convince them to allocate more money to states, because if we don't, then what is causing the state to
I think we lost you, Ann. But
Yeah, I think my internet is starting.
Right. Yeah.
so Verba, any other closing thoughts or other questions?
Go ahead.
To
Yeah.
waive.
But Amanda, bottom line, we will know more April 30th.
Yeah.
April 30th. And I think I'm sort of a regular at, board meetings during the springtime.
Yes.
So,
So let's,
even when we're virtual.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob.
Exactly. So we appreciate that. Amanda, should be pretty quick. But yes, to be determined. And really, Amanda and others, there's a resolution. We're not renting them all, but we are renting part of the parking lot, and I think a small office or space in the mall. We are part of coming out of the, it's not frankly all that much, but not any money coming out of our budget. This comes out of capital. And all the buses will be parked up at the mall. And that resolution is to go ahead and do that.
That's correct. So this will actually start, we had planned to do this no matter what, and obviously we need one location for the buses. The contractor is actually going to be covering May and June, the months of May and June, and we're covering the months of July and August. And so this is essentially for those operations to just be housed there for the short amount of time because there is massive paving happening at the parking lot in transportation.
Amanda, just one question on that.
So if I could have a motion, that'd be great.
Before we do the motion, I did not see that actually as part of the agreement what the cost was. Was that since or was that?
It's $5,000 each month.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
So are we looking for a motion?
Entertaining a motion. Anyone
Okay,
involved? Yes, please.
I move the adoption of 11.4 resolution to ratify a license agreement with the Ithaca Mall Realty LLC.
This is Chris. I
Thank you, Pat.
second.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions? Not hearing any, so I vote yes.
This is Pat. I vote yes.
Moira votes yes.
Anne votes yes.
Eldred, yes.
Aaron, yes.
Chris, yes.
Sean, yes.
Nicole still with us?
I am not sure. It looks like she may be present, but she may not be available right now.
Certainly enough votes to, yeah. Right, exactly. We certainly, and then we move on to the health insurance fund. And Chris, what's this about? Oh, it's the reserve fund.
Rob, Kate Reed is also here in case we have any questions.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Kate.
Hello, Kate.
Kate, and
Hi
I can
there.
speak to it as
Kate,
well.
why don't you speak to this quickly?
Sure. So this is to accompany the district's self-insured health plan, which was initiated back in 2017. We had a long road ahead of us in terms of being able to get the New York State Legislature to authorize Ithaca City School District to be able to establish a health insurance reserve fund to be able to make sure that our health insurance fund is adequately funded and adequately supported. So Ann Reichlin and others on the Legislative Advocacy Committee actually petitioned the New York State Legislature to get an amendment to the general municipal law to allow Ithaca City School District to do this. So once we obtained that authority, we have a requirement under the law to pass a policy that discloses clearly to the public how much the maximum amount we will actually keep in a reserve to help our health insurance. So the reserve policy that's before you that we're looking for board action on tonight basically allows the district to store in a health insurance reserve fund an amount not to exceed 55% of its overall annual health insurance expenses. That is not a legal recommendation from me. That's actually a actuarial recommendation from your health insurance consultant, which is E&V. So this will be supportive of your health fund, supportive of operations, and ensure that the district can support its self-insured health insurance plan.
And
I'm happy to answer any questions.
And Kate, we should just add the policy committee looked this over yesterday, and this is not adding to any budget line. These are funds that we recaptured when we left our insurance consortium. So they are funds that we already have that we're just legally designating to use in an acceptable way to support our health funds, so that this motion will not cost the taxpayer or the district any additional funds.
That's certainly correct, Pat. And actually something that bears repeating, because I know there's been a lot of time this past now, is the funds that are actually going to be designated in this reserve are already part of the district's unappropriated fund balance because we recaptured those when we withdrew from the consortium. When we were in the consortium, they were reserved because the consortium had the legal authority to reserve them. So those funds are essentially being treated exactly the same way. The only thing that changed was that as a school district, we also received that same authority to be able to designate those funds specifically for the purpose of health insurance. So that's correct. It's not costing the district anything. It's not funds that are going to be lost. It's merely appropriately designating funds that are already part of the district's unappropriated fund balance.
Thank you, Kate.
Pat,
and I know there was one other item too, is I know there was some discussion last night based on my discussion with Sean today regarding the language about whether the reserve fund should state that it will be maintained at a rate of 55% versus it won't exceed 55% of the overall costs. The original language that was in the policy was the recommendation of E&V, your health insurance consultant, because in a perfect world, they would like to see this reserve at that level. So that's why that recommendation language was in there, recognizing that we're not, at this point at least, not in a position to fund it up to that amount. We're really putting that in more as a cap and a not to exceed, as opposed to the amount that the reserve will be maintained at all times.
So this is Sean. A couple of quick items. Thank you for that clarification, Kate. And so board members can see the bolded text that
thank you, Kate. That's important.
Acknowledges that change. The change from shall not exceed to be funded at least at 55%. For the public who's paying attention, that also explicitly states how the funds can be used. This is not a savings account. This is under explicit law in terms of how the funds can be used and what should happen if the board decides to abolish the fund. The policy that's stated here helps outline those. So this was approved at the Finance Committee, was then moved to the Policy Committee. The Policy Committee made the bold text change, and we will go through our normal policy procedure of a first reading and a second reading, and then adoption upon second reading.
Second.
Thanks, Sean. Are you ready to move that? Did you move it?
Yes, I did not, but Moira beat me to the punch, so I move the policy for the
Oh,
health
I
insurance
thought you
reserve
had moved
fund.
it.
That's great. And we will make sure that we identify a number in the 6,000 series between the first and second reading.
Thank you for clarifying that. I really thought I had missed a whole part of this meeting. A lot of Zoom meetings today. Okay.
So I moved, Tricia, Pat, or Moira has second.
Got it.
Yeah. You've been a part of it all, Pat. Right. So, all in favor? I say yes.
Okay, this is Pat. I say yes.
This is Ann.
Eldred?
Oh, sorry. Ann, I vote yes.
We are voting on it. Thank you, Pat.
Eldred, yes.
I don't know if you heard me. It's Ann, yes.
Moira, yes.
Yep, we got you.
Chris, yes.
Aaron, yes.
Sean, yes.
Yeah, my kid's still out.
All right, so very good. So Sean, we'll see this next meeting, correct? Okay.
That is correct. We'll see it in the next meeting.
Well, it's, you know, it's like, makes me feel like I'm earning my pay. This is
It's really last item, folks.
going to board meetings.
Last item is just committee updates. We've actually heard from
Doing the
facilities, finance, curriculum, and a little bit of policy. Is there, and HR meets tomorrow. Is there anything from any of the committee groups that we need to touch base on tonight, or any updates?
I'll start with curriculum. I think we heard some of this yesterday. The curriculum committee had a chance to hear from two of our excellent.
Sean, anything? Yep, go ahead.
Go ahead, Eldred.
Oh, okay. I was just saying that yesterday, Maura, Pat, and myself had a chance to, as well as our executives, I think Laura was there, as well as Lily and Mary. We had a chance to hear from some of our excellent middle school art teachers who walked us through how they are rolling out distance learning 3.0. It was very encouraging. It was actually kind of spectacular. I don't know if my colleagues want to give any details, but you know, just further proof that we are having these conversations about what this rollout looks like. And I came away from that conversation thinking to myself, hey, we have some pretty good teachers, which was confirmed tonight by 2 additional math teachers. Thanks.
As a quick addition, policy met yesterday. We're reviewing a number of policies, one of which was just the health insurance reserve fund. We'll be meeting again soon. And for our community members, some of the work that we'll be doing, we'll try to continue with, but it'll be under a much different pace given the priorities we have. One will be the student code of conduct we'll follow up on. The other one will be or dog and or therapy animals. That will not be an immediate focus. We will be reviewing some other policies that have come to light in response to our distance learning 2.0. And so we'll have an agenda out soon.
Anyone else? If not, schedule is different than it has been, so we'll continue to be looking for those times and dates of the committee work sessions. You know, our known is that 2 weeks from tonight we will have our second public Board of Education meeting at 6 o'clock. And until then, we'll be meeting on HR meets tomorrow night for those who are interested. Other dates, certainly Tricia will keep us surprised. Dr. Brown, do you have anything else for the group before we let everybody go?
No, sir. Thank you for the time tonight.
All right, Dr. Brown. So, if no one has anything else, give you a minute. Are we good? I'm about the only one that gets to drive home. I'm still in the, and we'll see you all soon on the computer and hopefully in person soon.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Good night.